I am Bulus Ajlouny. I came to the United States in 1946 on the SS Vulcania, which was a troop ship, and I was with another lady, and I can't recall her name now. She's Mandar Ibrahim, and she was on the ship with us. And the ship also, this is how we came across. We took the train to Egypt, and in Egypt we went to Alexandria, and from Alexandria we took a ship to Naples, and from Naples we changed to another ship, and we took the ship to New York. I was 12 years of age. I was in the 4th grade. I barely spoke English. I knew door, window, just a few words here and there, because in Palestine at the time, it was a government school. We were not allowed to have any hair. It's got to be Yul Brynner, 0 haircut. And we were not allowed to wear any clothes we want. We had to wear a khaki pants, a khaki shirt, and a red sweater. And we lined up every morning in front of the classroom, and the teacher came and checked our hands, our ears, and of course we had no hair, so there was no bugs in the hair. The reason it was a Yul Brynner haircut is to eliminate bugs in your hair. And we lined up according to height, and we stayed in the classroom, and the teachers changed. We did not change like American style. You go from one classroom to the next to the next. In this instance, we only stayed in the classroom itself, and teacher X would come in, teach us the lesson. There'd be a break of 5 or 10 minutes, and the other teacher will come in to give us the other lesson. And I can tell you, point blank, that discipline has a lot to do with how the students behave. I was the monitor for the class, and my job was to make sure that the class kept quiet during the 5-minute period where we changed teachers. And the behavior of the student body in that class depended on who was coming next. If the teacher that was coming next was a stiff teacher, because if they did something wrong, I used to put their names on the board, and when the teacher comes in, you open your arms and you get 2 smacks here, 2 smacks there, and you go sit down. So if the teacher was a stiff teacher, the class was very quiet. If the incoming teacher was not a stiff teacher, it became mayhem. Everybody kicking somebody, hitting somebody, just mayhem. And it didn't make any difference if I put their names on the board or not, because the teacher that was coming in, he was a mayhem teacher. Even if I put their names on the board, it didn't make any difference because he would erase them. So in the end, I never put anybody's name on the board. But in the other teachers that were coming, they were stiff teachers. The class would be normal, quiet, because if I put their names on the board, they're going to get whipped. And they get whipped in their hands, and they go sit down. And this was the 4th grade class that I was the monitor, or Arif is in Arabic. And they used to threaten me, the students, because if I put their name on, but it didn't make any difference. And that was how I grew up in Ramallah. Now, it was not girls and boys, it was boys only. And the school was on top of the hill. It's still there now. It is now 2 stories. And most of us in that class didn't have any fathers. Because our fathers were in America trying to make a living. And the war came, and of course, there was no communication. The guy that was a teacher, and he had his son with us in the class, and we used to feel sorry for him because he used to use his son as an example of how to hit us. Because if his son did not behave, he got it. And the teacher was Mughannam. He taught us history and geography around the world. And his son's name was Adil. May God rest his soul, because he passed away in San Jose. In 46, the war was over. We took the train to Egypt from Lid, because there were no trains in Ramallah. And from there we went to Alexandria, and we took the ship, one ship, and we arrived at Alexandria, and we changed to a troop ship, in which the cot was nothing but a piece of cloth. And this is how you slept aboard ship. Obviously, living in a village, we're not accustomed to movement. And not being accustomed to movement is hell on high seas. You become quite ill. You want to throw up to almost every movement that comes in. And the only way I can keep myself from sustaining myself is to go to the bottom of the ship. Because the ship, it'll move this way and that way, so the upper portion will move more than the lower portion. And so I spent most of my time aboard ship all the way at the bottom. I had my brother with me, who was younger. He didn't feel a thing. No seasickness, no motion sickness, no nothing. But I was. We changed in Naples, as I indicated earlier, and there were brides, Italian brides, for the soldiers that married them, that they came into America. So the ship got loaded with young ladies coming to see their soldier husbands. And we arrived in America, of course, Long Island, and it was in the weekend, and I think it was even Easter at that time. And I lived in Ramallah, where if you saw a car one day a week, that was once too much. And here I'm looking out the ship and seeing endless cars. I used to stand on the ship, and I just wanted to see when will these cars end, and they never did. And we came to America, and they took the train to Florida, and we lived in Jacksonville for about 8-9 months. My father had a restaurant, and I used to wash dishes in the restaurant by I couldn't reach the top of the sink. There was no automatic dishwashers at my time, so I had to put a milk crate so I could reach to wash the dishes. And I washed the dishes and went to school. And from there, we went to Michigan. And in Michigan, I went to school there again. And I took an exam. In Michigan, you went to school based on where you lived. except for two schools, High School of Commerce, which taught girls how to type and to take shorthands and stenography, and Cass Tech High School, which taught us preparation for college, and it taught us a trade. These two schools were only open to students who qualified, and we had to take an exam, and if you qualified, you entered. If you didn't qualify, you went to your local high school. And I took the study of air conditioning, heating, and refrigeration by the guy that wrote the book. The book was written by Al House and Turnquist, and I graduated from high school. In the process of going to high school, I also used to work in a grocery store for 25 cents an hour. And I saw my father all my life. I don't remember ever asking him for any penny at all. The fact is, I used to sell papers after school, and I saved $600, and I gave him the $600 to put a down payment on a house. The house at the time was $5,000 in Detroit. I finished high school and went to work in my profession, and I also went to work as a draftsman, and decided to go overseas and get married, which I did. I went with 6 fellas, I believe, and these 6 fellas all brought back wives. Nadim was before us. He was married before us. There were 3 other Ajlounys. I don't want to mention their name because they're dead. It happens that I've outlived them, but that's life. And I went and I brought myself a wife who I've been married to for 62 years. She has been, excuse me, a help to me all my life. Without her, it would have been very difficult. Now, I graduated from the University of Kentucky in heating, ventilating, air conditioning, and refrigeration. And I went to work for the Carrier Corporation as a service engineer. From there, I went to work for Westinghouse, and I went to work for Worthington. All of these are air conditioning manufacturers. In Westinghouse and Worthington, I was the international service manager for their equipment. And by virtue of my knowledge of knowing how to fix with hands, plus the engineering background, I was in charge of the service division, and I was the service manager, and I traveled every place in the world, mostly except the Soviet Union, going to start up and repair air conditioning equipment. And I was coming back home one day, and my son, who was maybe about 10, he said, "Hi, Dad, when you're leaving?" I said, thinking to myself, this doesn't sound too good. Here I'm entering the door, coming back from an overseas trip, and rather than say, "Welcome back, Dad," he says, "Hi, Dad, when are you leaving?" So I decided to leave I was working for Westinghouse at the time. That was the last job. I says, I better get me a job locally so I can raise my children. Now, I could afford to travel because my father-in-law died early, and my mother-in-law came to live with us. She raised my children, and she lived with me for almost 30 years. And I never heard one negative word from her in 30 years. And people will tell me, he says, how can you live with your mother-in-law? I said, my mother-in-law raised my children. And she never had any negative word at all. And all my friends would tell me, hey, do you have a mother-in-law at home? I said, so what? Now, she raised my children. Now, if you go to look at my daughter's picture on her desk, you will see her with her grandmother, not with me and her mother, because we were both working. You go to my other son, the picture that he has on his desk is him and his grandmother, not me and his mother. So it was a plus for me to have her at home. And she died in New York. I brought her into California, and I buried her in California. Now, I went to work, or not to work. I established a company. You're familiar with cleaning contractors? They clean office buildings. It was a division of Warner Communication. They wanted, they had a cleaning the offices. They wanted to high-rise buildings and apartment complexes in the New York area. They wanted to start a division to take care of the electrical, heating, ventilating, glass, painting, anything to do with maintaining office buildings besides cleaning. And I started, there was nothing with them, so I started the company. Company was all Jewish. No. And when I went to work with them, I told them I'm a Palestinian. I hate Zionists. And if you want me to work, I will. But I'm not going to change my outlook for me to get this job. And they said, absolutely, all we're interested in is the bottom line. I said, fine. And I went to work and took over the World Trade Center, was under contract to me. First National City Bank was under contract to me. Chase Manhattan was under contract to me. I had the bank in California, Bank of America, building was under contract to me. I had buildings here in Washington that were under contract to me, and I had buildings in France that were under contract to me. I had approximately over 500 employees worldwide, and I ran a very tight ship, and I can give you an example of how tight that is. My brother-in-law was working for me at the World Trade Center. He got caught sleeping. So the foreman calls me up and he says, I caught your brother-in-law sleeping. What do you want me to do with him? I said to him, he's my brother-in-law when he visits me at home. He is a Tony Nasser. He's just a number, an employee like every other employee. So why are you calling me in the middle of the night? There are rules and regulations. He said, yes. I said, follow the rules and regulations. He said, well, I have to fire him. I says, what are you waiting for? He fired him, and I got him another job someplace else, obviously, but he did fire him. And that's the way it went. They used to come and want to discuss the Arab-Israeli war with me. I refused because I said, you are biased and you're logical, but you're illogical when it comes to the state of Israel. So therefore, why should I waste my energy and yours and develop a animosity between us? I'm not going to change your mind. You're not going to change mine. You are fair, but when it comes to the state of Israel, you're not fair because you do not see anything. And that's the way it went for all those years. I enjoyed what I did. Now, what I'm telling you is a fact. There is no fiction. I established a newspaper in Jerusalem. The name of it was called Al-Fajr. It spoke for the Palestinian statehood. And it continued to create uprisings indirectly. And that's the way it went. And America came to me and asked me to be a spy. I refused. They found a way to convict me for stealing, which there was not. And I was given a 2-year sentence, and I served 3 months out of the 2-year sentence in federal prison in Kentucky. It's an irony that I graduated from Kentucky, and I had to go back to jail to Kentucky. Now, before I went to, I surrendered myself to the jail. I took the plane and went in, and I said, I'm coming here to be incarcerated. Now, before I went to jail that day, the government sent in 3 agents to my house. They came in at 6 o'clock in the morning. So Vivian, which is my wife, opened the door, let them in. They said, you know, if you work with us, you don't have to spend 1 hour in jail. So I told Afaf, which is my wife, would you please show the gentleman the door? And she showed him the door, and they left, and I went to jail in Kentucky. I want to regress a little bit here to bring you up to date. I'm sorry, but my life is full of... While I was working for Kinney Mechanical Maintenance, which is a division that I established, I was invited to United Jewish Appeal dinners. You know what they are. They collect money for the United Jewish Appeal. The way they do it is, our business was to clean office buildings, correct? So they would make a dinner in honor of the chairman of the company. And who would they invite? They would invite all of the suppliers that supply cleaning supplies, mops, hand handles, or whatever, to come to that dinner. And at the end of the dinner, they would collect money for UJA, United Jewish Appeal. And they say, Joe, how much are you going to contribute for Mr. X? We say, well, I contribute 10,000. The other guy will say, I contribute 15,000. That's how they collected their money. It entered my mind that I should make a similar organization, and I made United Palestine Appeal. You've heard of it? It's my doing. I'm the founder. Now, rather than invent the wheel, I went and got the charter of the United Jewish Appeal. And rather than say the Jewish people, I said the Arab people, or it says the other people, the Palestinian people. There was a group of young attorneys working in New York, and they took it upon themselves as pro bono to submit this application on my behalf. But in order to have it look good, we invited other business people to join in the forming of this corporation. They were all afraid to put their addresses, because if you put your name, you have to put your address. All of them used my house address as their address, because they were afraid that they would come in. Anyway, I submitted it to the state of New York through the efforts of these young guys working for a law firm, and they refused to give it to me. I said, fine. You refuse to give it to me, now you have to cancel the United Jewish Appeal. And here it is, identical. So why would you give them their charter and refuse mine? And they changed their mind and gave me the charter. And I started the charter and opened offices here in Washington. There's United Jewish Appeal. The United Palestine Appeal is here in Washington. And when I went to jail, I didn't want to tarnish, and because I was the founder and the chairman and so forth of the organization, I refused to have the organization tarnished. I dropped out and put my wife in as a board member. Now, the existing board thought they were the founders. And I've been asking them to change it to, they know who the founders are, they know what was done to the organization. The first person that worked for me in that organization, you know George Salem? His wife, right here in Washington. I wanted to get the name of companies that were doing business in the Middle East, because I was going to knock on their door and ask for contributions. And she made the list. I opened offices here in Washington, and she made the list, and we made a dinner in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. I did not attend. Her husband did, and another person did, who was also a board member, who's a cousin of mine. And this is how the organization came into being and got started. Now they're claiming otherwise, that they were the founders of the organization. It is nonsense. I am. And if you go on the website, I put a website especially, UPA founder, and it lists exactly how UPA come into being. They had the 40th anniversary last year here, if you remember, if you follow through. And they all clapped for themselves that they were the ones that do it. I am not looking for, I know what I do. I'm not looking for grandiose ideas. I never believed in them. If I did, I would have ran for office in Hadi Ramallah. I never did, because I couldn't see eye to eye with their nonsense. And now I put UPA founding. You go on the website, and you could see the true story of how UPA was formulated. But of course, that has a tendency to tarnish their image, if that is the term. So this is how I came into being, and my two sons, I have two sons who are, my youngest son is a graduate from Boston University with computer engineering. At the time, he couldn't find any job, and he said to me, "Dad, can I go?" Because there was a slight depression at the time. "Can I go and become an attorney?" And I said, "Why not?" So he went to St. John and became an attorney as well. And his younger brother, his name is Omar, became an attorney. The oldest one decided to go back to school, and I was begging him to go to school before, but he didn't want to go to school. When his brother graduated, he decided to go back to school, and he asked me, is it okay to go back to school? He was married and he had two daughters. And so I made sure that everything was okay for them, and he went and got the law degree. And I call his business Ambulance Chaser, because he does accident cases for people that get into accidents. And the other fellow that graduated from Boston, Omar, he worked for the, I don't remember the name of the company in Silicon Valley, but he worked for them as a patent engineer, because he was a lawyer and also engineer. And he decided to go on law, open his law offices, which he did. And after that, he came to me and he said, "Dad, you know, I could be working on a case for 6 months. I go before a judge, and I know that I have all of the bases covered, and the judge would rule against me. I look stupid in front of my client, and I wasted my time and his money. So can I do something else?" And I said, "Yes, what you want to do?" He said, "Can I go in construction?" And I said, "Yes, you can." And he started a construction company in which he bought property in College Station, Texas. And he also in the capital of Texas, what is the name of it? I can't recall it at the moment.
Dallas?
No, not Dallas, no. Anyway, the capital of Texas, and he's doing quite well. My daughter, who's graduated of Georgetown, or George Washington, I don't know which one. Which one is the Jesuit?
Georgetown is the Catholic, kind of Jesuits, where Bill Clinton went to. Georgetown.
Yeah, but she's graduate not from the Jesuit, the other school.
The George Washington.
George Washington. I don't know how she got her degree, but she did. I hope she's not listening to me. And she came to me and she said, "Dad, would you loan me some money?" I said, "What do you want the money for?" She said, "I want to open up a boutique." And I said, "What do you know about boutiques?" She said, "You know, I'm a girl and I know fashion, etc." I said, you mustn't know all of these things, but you've never have been experienced in that field. I said, if you would work with someone for a year and learn the business, and then come to me, and I will finance you. She worked for a year, and she came to me at the end of the year, and she says, "Dad, can you give me money to open my own store?" And I did. I gave her $100,000, and she worked and made it success. and she repaid me every penny I gave her. And she went on to establish startups. She was the first woman in Silicon Valley to get money for a startup. And she started the first one and sold it. She started the second one and sold it. Now she's working on the third. And I said, Joy, Farha. Joy is Farha, which is my mother's name. I said, you don't have to work anymore. She says, what do you want me to do? Just sit at home? I can't do that. And so now she's working on her third startup. I said, fine. But I said, she's not married, and she's a very beautiful girl, even if I say so. But I think my eyes are good. And she asked me all the time, Dad, do I have to get married? And I said, no, but there's a big but. The big but is your mother and I are not going to live forever. Your brothers are married, they have their children, and they have their wives. And if you think that you can muscle in and live between them, you're mistaken. You have to have your own life and your own things to do in life. You can't be a part of their lives. I mean, they're your brothers, fine, but they're not part of your lives. And she never got married, although on one occasion we aborted the marriage on the day of the marriage. She came and said, I don't want to get married. I said, you don't want to get married? I can't put a gun. You're the one that selected this guy, and we made the invitation for a wedding, and now you don't want? It's better now than later. And she aborted, and we returned the gifts. And now she looks at me and she said, Dad, what am I going to do after you're gone? I said, I've told you that before. You have to have somebody in your life to pass the time with. You don't want to have any children, fine. You can adopt children or do whatever you want, but you need someone in your life. You have me and Mom now, but we're not here forever. Now, my son has two girls. He sent the first one to school, and he was sending the second one to school. The first one graduated master's from INSEAD. INSEAD is a French school in Paris. She got her master's degree, and the second one is now been accepted for her master's. She's a graduate of Columbia University, and she's been accepted to the London School of Business. So I picked up the phone and I said, Dad, do you need any money? He says, why are you asking me? I said, you got two girls going to school, and the tuition for each one is about $75,000 a year, plus all of their other expenses. And he said, Dad, let me remind you one thing. You sent me to school, didn't you? I said, yes. He says, why don't you allow me to send my own children to school? Thank you for the offer. But the way you send us to school, I want to send my children to school. And he did. I, with others, used to see that when somebody died, most of Ramallah people were living in Michigan. There was a lot here and there, but there was a large community in Michigan, Detroit. When somebody died, they would send flowers to the family of the deceased. And of course, the flowers will go in the cemetery. You come the next morning, they wouldn't find any single flower. which means somebody picks them up. So as young guys, we decided between us that in lieu of putting flowers on the graves, we would give money and give a list of the people that give money to the deceased family. لأنه الدنيا دين وسداد. And this is how the collection of money for the educational fund came into being. Besides other contributions, but the biggest part of it was this. And you looked at your watch, and my story will end shortly. And we established the money, and we started the educational fund. And it went on. Time passed. Now the money goes to the family, I guess. I don't know where it goes, but it doesn't come into the educational fund. Now, when my father died, I put some money in the educational fund. I put $15,000 to begin with, so I can give money to needy student in the name of Bulus Ajlouny. And I continued to add to it. I now have it to 85, and I told them I'll make it to 100. But on one condition, they have to give me papers to the effect that this Bulus Ajlouny Scholarship Fund is a part of the structure, and it is my money. If they change their mind, I don't want it back. But if they change their mind to the rules that I set aside of how this money is to be spent, then they have to give the money back. And up till now, they haven't done so, and I'm thinking now I'm going to forget about the money and establish another foundation for my father only and start giving it. Now, I'm on the educational committee. I was on the educational committee when I lived in New York by virtue of the foundation has people from the New York area on the educational committee. I think 3 or 4 or 5, I don't remember the numbers, but I was on the educational committee on a constant basis because I lived in New York. I don't live in New York anymore, but I'm on the educational committee by virtue of elections. And I see it, we had a meeting last Sunday, and it looked like it was a bazaar. Everybody wanting to put their relative or their friend to receive the money for education. That's not the way I see it. Education is for people that are in need. Excuse me. And then I'm a member, I was born in Ramallah. I've been a member of this federation ever since. I pay my dues, etc., and I'm sure everybody else does. But I wanted to know if the people that are asking for scholarships, have their parents been members of the federation? Shouldn't the members of the federation's neediest family be first rather than the students of whose fathers and mothers never paid any money into the federation or the foundation or whatever, be now submitting their names for scholarship? I say no. It's a shame, but I think it is the money should go to the neediest of the Ramallah people that have been members of the federation, not somebody from Ramallah who has never put a penny into the pot, being a member, pay his dues annually, all of a sudden his son becomes of age to go to college, and he has no money to send him, and he comes to submit his name, and he should be given priority because he's the son of A, B, C, or D. When I was on the committee from New York, I made it a point, because I know how the Ramallah family is, and I'm one of them, but I don't operate like they do. There is always a family connection somewheres. And the way I did it for a while with I used to give it the sheets without any names, numbers only. So you reading it, you don't know who this person is. All you know is his marks, and you don't know what family he comes from. That's not your job to know what family he comes from. Your job is to give him his scholarship based on his efforts and his willingness to go forward. They stopped that. So now the name of the student is there, and then there is pressure from the family. You say, hey, my son is on looking for a scholarship. Why don't you see if you can give it to him? Shouldn't we, as Ramallah people, give our money to the people that have given us support for all these years? Or should we give money to a student whose family has never contributed one penny to this structure? I mean, scholarship is scholarship. If we have excess money, then I would say, yes, go give it to the others. But if there is only so many, I think the ones that deserve it the most are the ones whose fathers and mothers or grandfathers and grandmothers have been members of this organization, and they paid their membership dues. If we had a meeting last Sunday, and it looked like it was a bazaar. Everybody was trying to push their favorite to come in. Now, I told you I established the Aziz Ajlouny Scholarship Fund earlier. It is not on paper yet, and I don't get involved in the selection because I am the founder and I don't want to be putting any weight on anybody, so the committee is the one that selects. But they have never given me any papers to that effect yet. It's getting to the point where I'm going to ignore it altogether, and I will make my own charitable organization and put some money into it and start giving scholarships, because I believe in education. Education is the only thing that lifts you up from where you are. If you don't have an education, but you know, there is a saying in Islam, رَبِّنَا خَلَقَكُمْ طَبَقَاتٌ طَبَقَاتٌ. Do you know what that translation means? I will. God brought you a layers of people, one layer after another after another. He brought you, they brought some of you to become doctors, brought some of you to become street sweepers, some to be merchants, some to be others. But in his eyes, you are all equal. But we are all a creature of whatever we are. You know, I was capable and it was very hard for me, but I was capable to become an engineer. There are others that might not. They're not less of a human being than I am. We're equal. But I have accomplished something. Maybe he couldn't. In the eyes of God, he's equal. But we are layers of people. And going back to this, in order, you know, when I worked for Westinghouse and so forth, I traveled the world. And in some instances, I would get a letter from, let's say that two are partners in this business. I would get a letter and say, for that piece of equipment that I just ordered, please put 5% on the side for me, but don't tell my partner that I'm getting the 5%. Sure as hell will come. 2 weeks later, I get a letter from the second guy telling me that, would you please put 5% for me, but don't tell my other guy. And this is life. So having been around the world, I decided to study religions around the world. And I became a Muslim. And I went to Mecca and Medina and saw what they did. And I have a certificate that says I'm a Muslim. And having said that, I can tell you that there are 5 things that are requirements for you to be a Muslim. Bitsum means to fast. Christians do fast. Bitsalli, Christians do salli. بتزور المحلات المقدسة. Christians بتزوروا المحلات المقدسة. بتعطي للفقير. Christians give to the فقير. There leaves one item. The one item is لا إله إلا الله, meaning there is no God but one. Christians believe that there is no God but one. There's only one element left. The other element is Muhammad Rasulullah. And Muhammad is a prophet of God. So the only difference between us is that Muhammad is a prophet. And Muhammad came after Jesus, and he was the last prophet on earth, according to their theory. And I converted into Islam, and I have a certificate, and I went to Mecca and Medina and saw what they did. Do you know that the thing that they go around on, Kaaba, you know where that came from? That came from the Jews. That came from Abraham. That's not theirs. Now, we as a Christians don't have a whole chapter on Maryam. You know who Maryam is? Maryam is the mother of God. The Muslims have a whole chapter on their Quran on Maryam. We in the Bible only have certain aspects, little smitten here, little smitten there, and little smitten there about Mary, the mother of God. I went to India, studied their religion. I went to China, studied their religion. To understand people, you have to understand how they were brought up and why they were brought up. If you do not know that, then you are not completely educated, because their thinking is based on their religion. And to understand their religion is 2/3 of your problems. My family was raised as a Catholic. I was raised as a Catholic. I used to serve the Mass for Abuna Ayad. You don't know who Abuna Ayad is. Abuna Ayad was the priest that basically was involved in killing the King Abdullah in Jordan. He was killed in Jerusalem, but he was the mastermind behind it. That is, of course, not written in the books any place, but that was the fact. And they were ready to even execute him, and until the Pope stepped in and took him away. How do I teach my children? I teach my children that we are all children of God. Each religion has its own merits and ways and customs. Now you see the Islam, the covering of the face with the eyes. That is not in their religion at all. Doesn't exist. This is all done by the Wahhabis in order to keep the ladies on the farm. At the time of Muhammad, the woman used to ride the horse and to take care of the wounded when they went to battle. She wasn't wearing the burqa. This came, in my opinion, came from Turkey. The black dress and the cover, this is mostly Turkish. And thank the Lord for Ataturk. They came and demolished all of that and got it all out of their system. So, but what I teach my children is that we are all children of God. We all have our way of communicating with God or the unknown, and don't do any negative thing to other people because you don't want other people to do negative things for you. And, excuse me, learn to be giving, because if you give, God will provide more. I can tell you, I go back and forth to Ramallah. I didn't tell you that. I established a company in Ramallah.
Yeah, that was my next question.
Yeah, but let me,
Relation to Ramallah.
my relation to Ramallah, because I started the newspaper in Jerusalem.
What year? What year?
In the 80s, before you were born. And it was involved in many activities, if you will, and it guided many activities. And let me just, since you asked that question, I opened the conference for the Peace Conference at Columbia University. It was a product of Al-Fajr, which is a newspaper, and New Outlook. And I delivered the speech, and I have it. And we started that conference at Columbia. And from there, it took off 111, and it became the treaty that Arafat signed in the White House. I was there when he signed it. So was Edward Said, Rabbna Yarhamu. And it was I and Edward Said told him not to sign it. And I told him exactly what is going to happen to him, and it did happen to him. I said, you will go back, you will have a place, you will raise your flag, they'll allow you to have your soldiers, but the soldiers will be serving them, not you. And eventually they will kill you. And this is exactly what happened. And now I own property in Jerusalem. I can't register it in my name because I'm not Jewish. I'm going to convert to Judaism and register the property in my name. And for your information, Judaism is the bloodiest of the religions. And when you come into a village, you destroy everything. Tree, house, cat, mouse, anything you come across, you destroy it. There is no other religion in the world that has that. So their religion is not conducive.
What do you think of America?
I have never voted in America. I'm a veteran of the U.S. Navy. I'm a veteran of the Korean War. America, the only way America will become a nation for the people, I'll repeat myself again, I never voted in America. And the reason for that, you are not voting for anyone that is going to serve you. You're voting for someone that money has already bought. And that someone, when he is elected, will not serve you. He will serve the people that gave him money. Not you. Don't think that way. And it's called here the lobbyist. Now, if you gave me $100,000 for my campaign, and if you knock on my door, you say, would you please do this for me? I'm certainly going to do that for you. So the only way that I would ever vote, and I think the only way that, and by the way, there was one of the senators, I think it was a senator from New York, and said that we should finance the elections. The government should finance the elections. Then it becomes free for all. Nobody's going to be knocking on my door and say, I gave you $100,000, can you do this for me? Now, the tax code that America has is the biggest tax code in the world. You don't know half of what is in there. There is all kinds of stuff in there. If you read it, you'll find something for you. Because why? They give money to these suckers, and these suckers will write a law that will protect them. And by the way, there's a lot of stuff in there, if you would read it, that you can use. I've used it many times. But most accountants don't know it because it's quite thick. Accountants are accustomed to, the guy is getting a salary, he's got a house, he's got a business. All of the other things are in the code, but you have to find them. And they are made specially for the rich people. So why should I go and vote? I didn't put him in there. And if I put him in there, he's going to abide by the guy that gave him the most money. So am I fooling myself that I elected him? No.